you were a doctor and you were sort of looking at what's happening to the earth, you say the earth has heart disease, cancer, diabetes, and a fever. And the fever is climate change. But the heart disease, diabetes, cancer also have to be addressed. You cannot just cool the fever and you say you're done.
Why, hello, and thank you for choosing the Vegan Luna podcast. If you came here to listen to influencers, business owners, people that are really making a change in this world and really creating some amazing ideas and amazing inventions, then you came to the right show. This show showcases some of the top people in the world that are making an impact, whether it's the environment, whether it's for health, or whether it's for the animals. This podcast is also available on YouTube, Apple Podcast, Spotify, Anchor, Google Podcast, Stitcher, and anywhere else you can find podcasts. I'd like to thank my sponsors, Purium, for providing some of the best organic superfoods that you could find on the market, as well as Vegan Nation, who is the first ever company to create a cruelty-free currency. Hello guys, and welcome to the Vegan Luna podcast. Today we're sitting down with an exciting person. His name is Dr. Sailesh Rao, and he has over 3 decades of professional experience and is the founder and executive director of Climate Healers, a nonprofit dedicated towards healing the Earth's climate. So without that further ado, we're jumping right into the interview. Thank you guys. Enjoy.
And then in 2006, 2005 actually, December, I happened to see Al Gore's presentation on TV and I was shocked. I said, if half of what he's saying is true, I'm wasting my time trying to make the same internet 10 times faster, even 10 times faster. So I looked into it and I realized it's actually far worse than what he was saying, because he was only focusing on climate change and energy. So there is a climate emergency right now, but there is also a biodiversity emergency. There is an ecosystems collapse emergency. There is a ocean dead zone emergency. There's all kinds of emergencies. There's a public health emergency. There are all kinds of issues that are coming together, and saying that we need to change our way of life. But he was trying to preserve the way of life that we have today. So I worked with Al Gore for a few years and then I quit. And I started Climate Healers in 2007. And the goal of Climate Healers is to reverse climate change, is to heal the climate, heal the earth. So, if you were a doctor and you were sort of looking at what's happening to the earth, you say the earth has heart disease, cancer, diabetes, and a fever. And the fever is climate change. But the heart disease, diabetes, cancer also have to be addressed. You cannot just cool the fever and you say you're done, which is what was going on in most environmental organizations. That's what they're trying to do. They think that the fever is the most important issue to address. So I started Climate Healers in 2007 to look at a holistic solution. And very soon I realized it was veganism. Veganism had to be the foundation of that solution. It had to be a system of normalized nonviolence, where we live and the planet thrives. So it's a little bit like, if you look at any other animal, the animal lives and the ecosystem thrives, because the animal routinely gives more than the animal takes from the system, right? Whereas we are the only animal that seems to take more than we give. And unfortunately, it's because of the game we are playing. The game of money makes us do that. So I started looking at the systems, because I'm a systems engineer. So I looked at what kind of systems do we need to have in place for non-violence to become normal. And that's what we've been working on. That's the main project now. It's called Vegan World 2026, because we want to put in place everything we need to create a completely vegan world within the next 6 years.
Yeah. So what do you think, are some of the stepping stones that you need to hit in order to get to this Vegan World 2026? Like, what are some of the things that you deem have to happen in your organization?
Well, we have created were a base camp group. And so there are over 25 study groups and task forces on Basecamp right now. And so we are looking at different aspects of the problem. So we started in 2018 with in the Vegan World 2026 conference, we just listed questions that we have. What are all the questions that we have about a vegan world, and how do you get to a vegan world? So we looked at questions in different categories, economic category, spiritual category, you name it, social category, and so on. And then, so based on those questions, we have formed these study groups to answer those questions. And so the things that need to happen, I see this as a systems project, just like the internet was a systems project. You have to break it down into pieces, and then you have to address each piece and make sure that the solutions you come up with are cohesive across all of them. So there is a larger group that is responsible for making sure that everything is cohesive. All the solutions we come up with are cohesive. And then we have to go and advocate for those solutions, educate people how to use them, and start getting it into the mainstream.
Yeah, absolutely. So take us back to your journey. At what point did you decide, like, you know what, I'm going to go vegan, and what was your journey like? What were you like before, and what led you up to make that decision?
Right. So when I started looking into the environmental issues, I was a lacto-vegetarian. I was vegetarian. I've been raised a vegetarian because I was brought up in India, and then I started looking into my own impact on the environment. What is it causing? And at that time, the literature basically said that vegetarianism is only a little bit worse than veganism. Okay. So vegans had a certain footprint, say 1.1 tons per year of CO2 emissions, and vegetarians were 1.3 tons, or something like that. Okay. And I bought into it at first. I said, yeah, that seems about reasonable. So I'm not that bad, right? I'm only a little bit worse. So I continued. But then I kept getting these doubts about it because I realized that there's a lot of land being used for animal agriculture, right? So during my training in Al Gore's Climate Reality Project, I was trained in the second batch to go and give his presentation. I asked Mr. Gore if all of the land that's currently being used for animal agriculture is returned back to forests, can we not reverse climate change? And he turned to his chief of staff, Roy Neal, and he said, how did this guy get in here? So it was clear that they didn't want to talk about it. And so I had these doubts, and I was making my calculations, and I was thinking that, this doesn't seem to resonate with the story I'm being told about CO2 emissions. So then in 2008, December, I happened to be in this forest in India. And so I was visiting this village where they had protected a certain amount of common land from their animals, and it was lush green forest. And just to the other side of the fence, you'll see it's barren land, and you see these old cows are walking around eating up whatever was growing underground. And then I realized that I'd been fooled, that I'd been deceived. Because the way they calculate the numbers, they assume that they do what is known as a local sensitivity analysis, which is they say, what if one person goes vegan? Okay, what is the impact of that? Well, one person goes vegan, it really doesn't change the overall situation, because the meat that the person doesn't eat is being fed to somebody else who's waiting to eat that meat, right? So effectively, nothing changes in the overall emissions. All we are doing is assigning the overall emissions differently. So that's what they were doing. That's called local sensitivity analysis. So then I said, if we did a global sensitivity analysis, which is if you assume that the whole world goes vegan, then the emissions for veganism is actually negative. because all that land can be reversed back, returned back to forests, and they'll start sucking down the CO2 from the air. Okay, so which means that the equivalent emissions for a vegan world is negative emissions, not 1.1 ton per person. You know, it should be minus something. And I realized that the emissions for lacto-vegetarianism is the worst, because because I didn't want to kill the cows, but I wanted to drink milk and eat milk sweets and all that, eat cheese pizza. And so which means you have to keep proliferating cows to get more milk out of them. And then you're going to let the cows live for 20 years or 25 years, eating up the forest. That's what was happening in India. So I realized that lacto-vegetarianism has the highest footprint. Okay, because if the whole world goes lacto-vegetarian, there'll be lots and lots of cows, and no one will be killing them. So that's when I said, "That's it. I'm going vegan." Yeah.
Wow.
So it's like someone turned on a key in my head and said, "Look at it this way," and instantly I said, "That's it. I see it. I'm going vegan."
I never heard before the way that you described the vegetarian.
Right.
Like that makes a lot of sense, because you have to think about it from a global scale.
Right.
And you have to compare it to a global scale in order to get really the closest accuracy of numbers. You know what I mean?
Right.
And like it's even a crazier comparison if you compare, instead of how the world is now to everyone being vegan, or how the world is now to everyone being vegetarian, what about everyone being eating like the Americans?
Right. Yeah.
And what if everyone ate like the US and then they went vegan, and you do that comparison? That's a crazy comparison, right?
Right. Right.
But the vegetarian one is interesting too, because you're right. If you were a vegetarian and you ate a lot of cheese, like, because obviously you could be a vegetarian that eats like little cheese or no cheese, or there's so many different kinds. But like, let's say it was one that ate a lot of cheese and milk.
Mm.
Yeah, you're right. You need a lot of cows and living for a lot longer.
Right.
And because you're vegetarian, that means you're right. You wouldn't want to kill the cows. So you'd be like, let's protect them. Let's let them live as long as they can. Oh, but we should
Right.
get them pregnant. What do we do with the baby boys? It's complicated. Now you're on a crazy, massive amount of cow scale just for milk.
Right. Right.
Oh
And
my God.
also, I didn't want to hurt the baby cows, the male calves. I didn't want to hurt. In fact, I wanted the calves to drink the milk, and then I wanted to take just the extra milk for our consumption. And you see, you'll be proliferating cows like crazy. I said, no, that's the absolute worst. What I'm thinking is the ideal is actually the absolute worst. So that gave me a sense of humility. I mean, because I felt shame because I had been judging myself to be superior to others. and, and I realized I was the worst. And I was looking around to make sure no one noticed, that I was the worst. And then that was it. I didn't want to judge people anymore. I wanted to just go vegan, and I want to then tell people, this is what happened to me. This is why I did it. Please look at it from this perspective of a global analysis, global sensitivity analysis.
Yeah, that's so cool. So now tell me, what are some of the projects that you're working on? What are some of the things that you're doing to help, fight for the animals, or fight for the planet, or fight for human health? What are some?
Right.
Yeah.
See, initially I started writing books. I wrote my first book in 2011 called Carbon Dharma. And because it's about what is the right thing to do, it's fairly easy to figure that out, which is being kind to all life, And I thought that would help educate people, but it didn't. I mean, it was modestly successful, but it wasn't. It didn't really change a lot of people as I expected. So then I said, okay, what is the best way to reach people? And I started doing documentaries. I started becoming a producer of documentaries. So we did the documentary called The Human Experiment first, which talked about the chemical pollution of the planet. And then we did Cowspiracy, the sustainability secret, so which talked about the environmental aspect of it. And actually, after Cowspiracy, I sent Cowspiracy to all the environmental people I knew and gave them a link to watch it. And uh, almost no one replied back to me except one prominent environmentalist who said, "You think the world will be vegan? Are you crazy? The world will not go vegan until the human population is down to 1 billion." So that's when I realized that's the model that they're using, is that they're trying to create, use nature to sort of cull the human population. And so I'm determined now that that cannot happen. I even asked the gentleman, are you going to sit around eating meat when you see billions of people dying around you? If you do that, whose meat are you really eating? It's awful that we would even think like that. So anyway, that was the second documentary. And then we did What the Health, the third documentary. That came out in 2017. So we're looking at hitting every angle, environmental angle, health angle. And then we did Prayer for Compassion. This is the latest documentary that came out in March of this year. And that's about animals and love. So health, environment, animals, and love. And that's heal.
Yeah.
So that's the documentaries. And then we started a project called Vegan World 2026, which is based on the year 2026 is important because it is at the current rate of killing of wild animals, we are on track to wipe out almost all of them by 2026. So we have no choice but to reverse this by that time. So I use that date as the date of year zero that in the current system. And we need to measure, how many wild animals are left by 2026. That gives us a measure of how successful we are at creating a vegan world by 2026.
Yeah,
okay?
That's great. I like that a lot. Yeah, I think that what I like about the community so far in general, like since I'm fairly new to veganism, is that there's so many people that I can continue to talk to and learn about that are just fighting. Like I said earlier, like the name of my tagline is conversations with people that are fighting to make the world a better place. And I find it interesting that there's so many people out there. And if you were to just turn on the news right now, you would never hear a story like ours right now. You would never hear about a story that we're talking about. You would never hear about the young man that walks the old lady across the street to get some help. The only thing that you're going to watch on the media is where the next hurricane hit, what was the biggest tornado, where's the wildfire, who murdered what, here's a police car chase, this is what's happening in the Middle East. All you hear is negative, 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 negative.
Right.
And I feel like if you consume that media, that's the media that they want. They want you to consume that media because that's what controls, the people. Fear, when people are afraid,
Right.
And when I do this and I create my own media, this is the media that I think people should watch. This is the media that teaches you, like what's really happening, from behind the scenes, from people that have been working on this for years, like some people I talk to 30, 40, 50 years working on this, on one project, on one phase. Of course, they're going to know a lot more than some random news anchor, that's even heard about this, but that's where people get their information, or from influencers or celebrities. But I just think it's interesting, that what we can do in today's age, is change the media. And that's why some of these social justice movements, like let's say veganism, or environmentalism, have grown so fast within these latest years because of the internet, because of the work you did on the internet. You were like, hey, one day I'm going to do something great and I need people to get it, it needs to reach them fast. That's why I'm creating the internet, to be faster. It needs to be digital. No, I'm just kidding. But seriously, I think it's cool, that we have an opportunity. Like, let's say if I wanted to create my own TV show, in the height of the TV's, central, let's say the 70s or the 80s, I want to have my own TV show. Like, hell no. How much money do I need to create my own TV show? Right now, anybody can create their own TV show. Just go on YouTube, start a YouTube channel. It's just cool that we can. My point is that as I talk to more people like you, I find there's so many people out there that are working to really make the world a better place. Is there anyone that maybe you look towards that really inspires you? You're like, man, that person inspires me of what's possible. Like maybe even it's a young girl like Greta Thunberg, you know what I mean? Like
Right,
art
right.
inspire you, like, man, yeah, they're doing the right thing in a big way.
So the first person who really brought me to veganism, who even told me the word vegan, was Dr. Will Tuttle. I went to one of his talks in, I think it was Sacramento, and I heard him, and he even gave me his book, and uh, and I was thinking, my God, this man has been vegan for so long, and he doesn't even eat dairy, and so it seemed to me an ideal. That, but at that time, I thought, well, I am almost as good because I'm only drinking milk, right? And so, but that was there in the back of my mind when I went to this forest in India and saw what was going on. So then it hit me, right? So he inspires me. He also travels the world talking to people, educating people, and and he looks at it very holistically as well. And but he's looking at it from more of a spiritual angle. And I'm trying to combine the spiritual angle with engineering as well. How do you engineer a system? Because to me, civilization is an engineering project. And so the second person who really inspires me, who inspired me from her birth onward, was my granddaughter. Because when she was born, I was very depressed. I thought we were going to hell in a handbasket. The environment was, there's nothing I could do about it. And but when she was born in Phoenix, and we were living in the Bay Area at that time. And I went to see her when she was a month old, and I held her in my arms, and I had this feeling of perfection. That uh, so she was looking up at me and smiling, and I realized that this girl belongs exactly as she is, which means we all must belong exactly as we are, and therefore we are not telling the right story. And so I decided to look for that story. So I spent 5 years looking for that story, actually, and I wrote a book called Carbon Yoga in 2016, which is about this new story that we have to tell as a species. Because it's by telling stories that we coordinate our actions among billions of us. And the current story we are telling is that we are just here to just destroy the planet. We're not part of nature. We're outside of nature, right? And actually, the story that I tell in Carbon Yoga is that we have always been part of nature, and nature has used us to create homeostasis for the planet, and so that the temperature is constant. And so we kept the temperature constant for 10,000 years during the agricultural revolution. And then during the industrial revolution, we started burning fossil fuels, and we increased the temperature by 1 degree Celsius, or really 2 degrees Fahrenheit. And in the process, we have discovered all the tools and technologies we need to understand what we did, that we kept the temperature constant for 10,000 years. And now we have the chance to bring it back to that same setting, the thermostat setting, and keep it there for the rest of eternity if you want to. So that's my goal in the Vegan World 2026 project, is to create this new infrastructure and new way of looking at things, so that I can hand it over to your generation and to my granddaughter's generation and say, don't blame us. We did something that was good for you too.
Yeah, that's the biggest, like, one of the biggest fears in a way, is like, I don't want to be like, look back, 20 years, 20 years later and say, man, I could have done something. I could have actually, like, I knew what was going on, and I sat there and just did nothing. Like, that's kind of scary. I don't want to be that either. Right. So, is there anything that maybe you want to add that maybe you didn't share already, that maybe something you're super passionate about that you really want to share, or maybe something that you shared already that maybe you just want to reiterate or add some more info about?
Yeah, so see, raising a granddaughter vegan. So by that time I was vegan, right? So, and we sort of talked to my son and her mother, and we basically said, yeah, it's a good idea because especially from a health perspective, to raise a child vegan. So we tried to do that. And raising her vegan opened our eyes. She opened our eyes to a lot of the violence that was going on. That we had gotten used to it, and we were not even seeing the violence. So, like, you cannot read any fairy tale to her. She'll tell you, why did that happen? Why did that animal get killed? Right? Or I cannot read any of the epics to her. My epics, all our epics have violence in them. It's all about war. There's no war going on. So she says, no, I don't want to hear that. And so that was an eye-opener for me. Learning from my granddaughter has been an eye-opening experience. And then also the way the 2026 project came about, she basically put her finger on me and said, you're it. You better get me a vegan world by 2026, by the time I'm 16. Or, she asked me to promise her that will happen. And I promised her because she was crying so hard, at night. So the way it happened was I was reading her a story in bed. And at the end of the story, she asked me, Grandpa, who were the first human beings? So I tried to explain to her about evolution. I said, imagine that you're standing on the street and you're holding your mother by your hand. You ask your mother to bring her mother to stand by her side, and so on. You create a long line of mothers on this side of the street. And on the other side of the street, you ask a chimpanzee to do the same thing with her mother and her grandmother, and so on. So I said, by the time these two lines go from Phoenix to Tucson, they would merge. There'll be only one single line, because both lines are going to say, that's my mother too. So immediately she sat up in bed and she said, what? Are you telling me that animals are my family? And I said, yeah, they are your family. And she said, then why are people eating my family? Grandpa, make them stop. And she started bawling. She started naming names of all the people that she knew who were eating her family. And I told her, Kima, this is what I do. In fact, this is my job, to make them stop. So immediately she stopped crying and she looked at me and she said, this is your job? This is your job? You haven't done your job. So when will you do your job? She really thought my job was to take away their food and give them better food to eat, right? And I wasn't doing my job. So I said, I have to do it by 2026, otherwise we are all in big trouble. And she held me to it. She said, will you promise me that? And I said, sure. And so that's how the project even came about, So
Yeah.
she made me give her a pinky promise. And so she said, you can never, ever break a pinky promise. Right?
You can't break those. Yeah,
You can't break those. Yeah.
Special place for people to break pinky promises.
Right. See, and I also, at first I thought, who am I to do this? And then I realized, it is an engineering project. So who else can do this? I am a systems engineer. I'm supposed to be putting my head into doing this, something like this. Yeah. So then I assumed responsibility for it. I said, okay, this is my job and I got to do this. And I started then going around talking to people and trying to build my team, So now there are over 250 people on Basecamp who are working on this, who are looking at, who are part of different study groups, and we are looking at different aspects of the problem. So, I did a tour of India last month, and went to 14 cities in 1 month, talking to people, and recruited a lot of people to be on Basecamp, and to also form climate healers groups so that they can spread the word there in India as well. Because I felt that it's really about marrying the West and the East. It's about marrying the South and the North. It's about taking the best of India, the Indian civilization, and best of the Western civilization, and putting it together. So that's what Basecamp is trying to do, because India had always had a very free and creative inner world, and a very rigid and doctrinaire outer world with the caste system and all that, right? And the West had always had a very rigid and doctrinaire inner world, where you always have to listen to the priest, and a very free and creative outer world, material world, so with science and technology and so on. So it's about putting the two together so that you get the best of both, a very free and creative inner world and an outer world. So
Yeah,
that's what we're trying to do on Basecamp. Yeah.
that's awesome. Yeah, so I love that. So is there anything else that you want to add?
Yeah, so I'm planning on doing a similar tour of the US. And because one of the, see, I go around screening documentaries and giving talks in India, and everywhere they ask me, why didn't you bring your granddaughter? We want to meet her. So during her summer break this year, in 2020, we are planning to just go around and in the US and talk to people, show documentaries, and recruit more people to be on Basecamp, helping us with this solution.
So where can people find you if they really want to learn more about your story, or they want to follow you, or they want to join Basecamp, or if they just need more information, like maybe they're still in denial about climate change or anything like that? Where can
Yeah.
they do that kind of
So go to climatehealers.org. Climatehealers.org has all of the data that I have collected, all of the research that I've done. I have put it up there for free. So even my books are there for free. You can read it. And uh, so it explains why we do what we do. So I've written a white paper on animal agriculture, showing why animal agriculture is the leading cause of climate change also. Because so far, people thought it was the leading cause of biodiversity loss, ecosystems collapse, and all these other things, but not climate change, right? These fossil fuels are the leading cause of climate change. I'm saying, no, no, no. It is actually the leading cause of climate change as well. In fact, on an annual basis, the methane from cows causes more heating than the CO2 from all fossil fuel sources combined. Okay, so if we don't deal with animal agriculture, if we don't deal with the way we treat animals, we're not being serious about climate change. So I made that very clear in the white paper. So I would like people to go read that. It is written in a way that is understandable by someone with a good technical sense. So, and I have citations for all the data that I've taken, and it's all from peer-reviewed sources. So I'm making the case for why everyone has to go vegan and everyone has to join this movement towards compassion. And that's the only way out. Because what we say in Climate Healers is that the compassion for all life is infinitely sustainable.
Yeah.
And violence towards any form of life is not sustainable.
That's great. Yeah, for sure. So is there any other places where people could reach out to you? Maybe Instagram, Facebook, anywhere else?
Right. Facebook is Climate Healers. Twitter, it's Climate Healers. Instagram, it's Vegan World 2026. And of course, my personal account on Facebook, I think I have 5,000 friends, so I cannot get any more friends. I may have to create something else, some public figure page or something like that.
Yeah, public figure page. Yeah, that'll get some more.
Right. But climatehealers.org is the best place to reach me. And from there, you'll see a link to the survey for Basecamp. So if you click on that, it'll tell you what are all the study groups on Basecamp and what do you want to join and what are your skills. So basically, we know where to put you, which team to put you in. And then you can contribute towards creating a vegan world. Because right now, it's all hands on deck. We have to do this all together. So the time to get involved is now, especially if you're vegan. I would recommend, I would urge other people to go vegan first before they join Basecamp, because Basecamp, we are assuming that everyone is vegan when you come in.
All right. Well, that's excellent. Yeah, we'll be sharing this everywhere. Of course, my podcasts are available on my YouTube channel. And then also you can find these anywhere you listen to podcasts. Anywhere from Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, Spotify, iHeartRadio, pretty much everywhere, all the major ones are where you can find the podcast, the Vegan Luna podcast. So thank you so much for your time. And I'll be talking to you soon. And I'll let you know as soon as this one's all available and ready to share.
Thank you, Kevin.
Yeah, absolutely. Take care. Have a great rest of your day. Happy holidays as they come up here around the corner.
Yeah, happy holidays to you as well.
All right. Thank you. Bye.